Chef, it's decaffeinated, but I'm sorry, I don't think I have sugar now. It's tea.
Now again, if you don't show up to the Halaqa, I miss you in the conference. You have to show up to everything. I said, if now if you don't show up to my sessions, punishment is only in the next life. And from amongst the Muslims who have this ideology are the rationalist Muslims, which are called the Mu'tazilites. When you study Aqidah or theology in school, if you even take an Islamic studies class in college, they'll tell you, oh, there's a school. And amongst that school of thought is there's Ibn Hazm, rahimahullah. Ibn Hazm, rahimahullah, was a great Andalusi scholar of the 9th century. He was very knowledgeable. He's born in Cordoba, and he has a lot of books written on fiqh. And he was known for his memory, particularly in his eloquence. He also he was a Shafi'i. Then he went independent from the school of thought. And everyone has a right for their views. He has his own views on many things, and one of them was that he didn't believe that there's a punishment in the grave. The punishment is purely in the next life, and the soul. He did believe in the punishment in the next life. And the Mu'tazilites, their argument is there is no ayah in the Quran that clearly proves the punishment of the grave. And the answer to that is Suyuti's under the tafsir of النار يعرضون عليها غدوا وعشيا ويوم تقوم الساعة. That النار يعرضون عليها غدوا وعشيا. Fire is presented in front of these people day and night. ويوم تقوم الساعة. Then the day of judgment begins. So Suyuti says that this means تعقيبا, this happens first, then this event takes place. So where is the fire being presented to these people? Morning and evening, which is a grave. When the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-qabru rawdatun min riyadil jannah wa hufratun min hufri an-niran or nar." The grave is a garden of paradise or a pit of hell. So there are actually 3 opinions on this from those who have the false or have wrong ideology. And I've actually sat with members in our community who did not believe in the punishment of the grave. Very prominent people. And you would think they've read a lot and they give lectures. Matter of fact, some of them give halaqas. And I sat with them And then you have some Arab speakers, Adnan Ibrahim, and these modern speakers from the Arab speakers, and also Urdu speaking speakers and American speakers that would just share. They actually take, with all these people who are secular Muslims too, they take the same arguments that have been brought up by Ibn Hazm 1,000 years ago or 500 years ago, and they will bring them back, resurface them in a very intellectual and philosophical discussion. Of course, it's the fact that we can't wrap our minds behind it. One of the things about people who are secular and atheists, because they cannot wrap their mind upon an idea, they refute an idea. And part of that's arrogance. It's not intellectual, preference. It's an arrogant mentality. I just don't understand how Uthman and Ali, they fought. How could they have fought? They're Sahaba. And then they just can't understand it. So the first one is the opinion of the Mu'tazilites, or the secular rationalist Muslims. They will say that everything has to be rationalized. They will say that it's only on the ruh. So the soul is being punished, the ruh. Or they say that there is, the ruh is what's getting punished, but there's some type of relationship with the body, but they don't define that relationship. And the third one, they say it's only there's a punishment on the body and there's no punishment on the soul. So a dead body without a soul is being punished. These are three opinions that they share. And we have, through the Quran and Sunnah, we have evidence from the Prophet ﷺ's authentic narration that when a person dies, إِذَا مَاتَ يَكُونُ فِي نَعِيمٍ, right away, his or her punishment begins, and their reward also begins. Right away when the soul leaves the body. There's a constant, the reward of a pious person dying starts at death. You can't delay it to resurrection. It's just unfair. There's so much proof for that the moment you die, your reward begins. We know so many narrations, we just can't see it. There's so many hadith coming to my mind. It was not part of my research, but Prophet ﷺ is walking, and the Sahabi is talking to the Prophet ﷺ, and he leans over and he falls. And he falls off the camel and he dies, collapsed on the spot. And the Prophet ﷺ said, move the sheep of this person, where his garment was covering his stomach. He said, move it, I want to see his stomach. And he noticed that he had a stone tied to his stomach out of hunger. And the Sahaba said, Rasulullah, why did you ask us to do all of this? He said, because I saw angels from the heavens coming from Jannah to bringing him food. And how can he see something? And is that food as nutritious as the food of this dunya? And does that food have an after effect, like we do when we eat this in this world? You eat something sweet, or something bitter, there's a smell. We know that happens with Hanbala. Sahih hadith. Hanbala radiallahu anhu got married right before Uhud. His urs was the eve of Uhud. The eve of Uhud was his urs. The next day of Uhud. The battle happened, the Sahabas were losing. Hanbala hears that there's this rumor the Prophet died. He's like, what? He gets up, leaves the home, and he didn't take a shower. And later on, he's martyred, he's shaheed. His wife comes onto the battlefield. A lot of times when we talk about, when I talk about seerah, there's this constant highlight on the shaheed, but there's very less focus on the family of the shaheed. Okay, Ja'far, he's gone to Jannah, but let's talk about what the family went through after Ja'far. Right? Good for Ja'far. Good for Ja'far radiallahu anhu. Good for Hanbala. He's Jannah. So let's focus. She comes running to the Prophet and says, this is my situation. He didn't take a bath before leaving the house. The Prophet says, غَسِيرُ الْمَلَائِكَةِ, I saw angels come from the heavens to wash Hanbala. Sahaba were curious. They didn't question the Prophet, but they're like, really? And they go to the body of Hanbala and they notice all of his hair is wet. And it didn't rain. Where is this water coming from? Where are these angels coming from? This whole perspective. There's so many things like this that happen, in the Prophet's time. Interesting events happen. When I read the seerah, that I have no problem believing in them because I see things. This is where Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu says it. This is where our iman has to be tasdeeq, has to be solidified. Where Abu Bakr is told about Mi'raj, and Abu Jahl has to rationalize the idea. Like, how? How can someone go from here, Makkah, to Bayt al-Maqdis, heavens and back? It just doesn't set well with us. He goes to Abu Bakr radiallahu, Abu Jahl informed Abu Bakr of this whole incident. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu says, I believe it. He said, who said this? He said, your friend, your sahibuk. He says, I believe it. Usaddiqu. How can you believe this? This is the moment Abu Bakr was called a Siddiq. He says, I believe in matters which are even more difficult to imagine. Like, you're telling me you went to Bayt al-Maqdis. I know Bayt al-Maqdis exists on the map of the earth, right? I don't know about Jannah and Jahannam, but he told me about it. I believe it. And, I believe on matters ashad min dhalik, like which are hard to believe in. So this is easy. So the grave is also one of those discussions. But the good thing about even the Mu'tazilites, I wouldn't say like the Mu'tazilites are kafirs, or like the rational, they're completely disbelievers, like other seculars who don't believe in the punishment of the grave, but they believe in the resurrection. And some of them believe in the punishment of the soul. So the punishment of the grave, which is simultaneous with the body and the soul, is not just an opinion of the majority of the Muslim scholars, but it's also the opinion of the Jews and the Christian scholars. They have evidence for that too in their scriptures. Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, a lot of his stories, authentic stories that we find, Ihya Ulumuddin, Qisas, where he would go wake up a dead person. He would wake up, وَحْيِ الْمَوْتَ بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. And one of the things he would do is talk about what happened to the grave. Now a dead man is coming alive, talking about the punishment of the grave. So there was stories of this from Isa alayhi salam's tradition. In Bukhari and Muslim, I shared the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the last part of the hadith I did not share. I want to share that with you today. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said, "Anna Nabi marra biqabrayn." He walked by two graves and he noticed they were being punished. إِنَّهُمَا لِيُعَذِّبَانِ. So there is a punishment of the grave. This hadith in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. So it's authentic. And he says, وَمَا يُعَذِّبَانِ فِي كَبِيرٍ. And they're not being punished for something major. And I talked about this last week. وَأَمَّا أَحَدُهُمْ فَكَانَ لَا يَسْتَقِرُ مِنَ الْبَوْلِ. One of them was not very careful when he used the bathroom. وَمَا الْآخَرُ فَكَانَ يَمْشِي بِالنَّمِيمَةِ. The other person would walk around and share gossip and negative information, ثُمَّ دَعَا بِجَرِيدَةٍ نَطَبَةٍ. And the Prophet ﷺ asked for a fresh branch, and he فَشَقَّهَا نِصْفَيْنِ. He broke it in half, and he shoved it into the ground. He pegged it to the ground on one side and pegged the other one on the other grave. And this is what he said: لَعَلَّهُ يُخَفَّفُ عَنْهُمَا مَا لَمْ يَيْبَسَا. This is interesting. And he said, I hope that these branches, as long as they're there, this will be a means of the punishment of the grave becoming lighter upon those who are in the grave. This brings up a whole chapter of a discussion. We're not going to go into that discussion, but what happens here is, why? You tell me, guys, why is the Prophet ﷺ taking a fresh branch, pegging to the ground and saying, hopefully this branch is going to help those in the grave? What relevance does a branch of a tree have to the people in the grave? Anybody? I'll drink my coffee. In the meantime, you guys give me a moment. I'm looking for an answer. They're keeping who alive? The dead are keeping the branch alive. Salam, at least he's answering. Alhamdulillah. Salam is philosophical, scientific. Paris climate agreement has affected him. No, she's really close. Anybody else? Give him to the hand of round of applause, mashallah. Yeah, the dhikr of the branch. The dhikr of a branch. The trees do dhikr, right? وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ لَا يُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِهِ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَفْقَهُونَ تَسْبِيحَهُ. As long as the tree is alive. So the first part is accurate. The tree is alive, the tree is doing dhikr. The tree is dead, it has no life. So if that's an effect of a tree, which by its nature is not created, and by its inception, it's not accountable for ibadah. Like Allah won't send a tree to Jahannam because it didn't do dhikr. By its disposition, it's always doing dhikr. Humans, which are better and more noble creation of a tree, if a human goes to someone's grave, whose someone who's being punished in their grave, and they sit next to their grave and they do dhikr, what will be the effect of that? If a lone, fresh branch can affect this tree or this deceased person, what could be the effect of something else? Right? And again, we don't want to have this ada, the courage. It's not even encouraging people to every time you bury someone, plant a tree in front of them. Then it's just bid'ah. Right? It's not something that we want to do. It's innovation. Here is this is why I found the Prophet doing this. He said, لَعَلَّهُ. The Prophet was very optimistic from small things. Okay, let's go ahead. Another narration of the Prophet ﷺ, this is in Sahih Muslim, and Zayd ibn Thabit. I didn't share this last week. He said, we were with the Prophet ﷺ on the right of the Prophet وَنَحْنُ مَعَهُ إِذْ حَادَتْ مِنْ فَكَادَتْ مِلْقِهِ فَإِذَا we were with him, and then all of a sudden we came to a place where there were the animal of the Prophet hesitated moving forward. Animals can hear the punishment of the grave, which will be a discussion coming up in a few minutes. There were around أَقْبُرٌ سِتَّةٌ أو خَمْسَةٌ أو أَرْبَعَةٌ. There were like 4, 5, 6 graves. And the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ يَعْرِفُ أَصْحَابَ هَذِهِ الْقُبُورِ. Who knows those who are buried here? فَقَالَ رَجُلٌ أَنَا يَا رَسُولَ. He said, I. فَمَتَى مَاتَ هَؤُلَاء. The Prophet said, when did these people die? They said, مَاتُوا فِي الْإِشْرَاقِ. They died before Nubuwwah, before you became a prophet. Then the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ تُبْتَلَى فِي قُبُورِهَا. People of this ummah are going to be punished in their grave. فَلَوْلَا أَنْ لَا تَدَافَلُوا لَدَعَوْتُ اللَّهَ أَنْ لَا تَدَافَلُوا لَدَعَوْتُ اللَّهَ أَنْ يُسْمِعَكُم مِّنْ عَذَابِ الْقَبْرِ الَّذِي أَسْمَعُ مِنْهُ. It says, if it wasn't for you guys, stop burying your family members in the grave. لَوْلَا أَنْ لَا تَدَافَلُوا. If it wasn't for the fear that you would stop burying your dead in the grave, I would ask Allah to make you hear the punishment of the grave that I can hear. It's Sahih Muslim. He says, فَلَوْلَا أَنْ لَا تَدَافَلُوا لَدَعَوْتُ اللَّهَ أَنْ يُسْمِعَكُم مِّنْ عَذَابِ الْقَبْرِ الَّذِي أَسْمَعُ. This is the first time after a long time I came across this narration. I take into a different perspective on this. A person like the Prophet who can hear the punishment of the grave, imagine his faith. Imagine how he's talking to you and me. Like, I hear the dead being punished. I'm telling you, don't miss salah. I'm telling you, I hear the punishment of the grave. Don't do this. It's not like, it's concrete information. You see a cop on Corona, and someone messages on the group, there's a cop on Corona, everybody. The Prophet ﷺ is telling you and me there's this punishment. And everyone's like, yeah, let's pray, not pray, let's just chill, figure it out. ثُمَّ أَقْبَلَ عَلَيْنَا بِوَجْهِهِ. And the Prophet looked at us, and he says, تَعَوَّذُوا بِاللَّهِ مِنْ عَذَابِ النَّارِ. I'm telling you guys, ask Allah protection from the punishment of the grave. Then we all said, نَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ عَذَابِ النَّارِ. Then the Prophet ﷺ said it 3 times, تَعَوَّذُوا بِاللَّهِ مِنْ عَذَابِ النَّارِ. تَعَوَّذُوا بِاللَّهِ مِنْ عَذَابِ الْقَبْرِ. Ask Allah to save you from the punishment of the grave. قَالُوا نَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ عَذَابِ الْقَبْرِ. Then he said it again. Then he said, تَعَوَّذُوا بِاللَّهِ مِنْ فِتَنٍ مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَمَا بَطَنَ. Ask Allah to protect you from trials, which is apparent trials and hidden trials. قالوا نعوذ بالله من فتنة ما ظهر منها وما بطن. قالوا تعوذ بالله من فتنة الدجال. Ask Allah protection from the fitna of Dajjal. And then we seek Allah's protection from the fitna of Dajjal. That is Sahih Muslim narration. Then the Prophet ﷺ, this became an aad of the Prophet ﷺ, when he would finish salawat al Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the shahud al-akhir, he would recite, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min jahannam, wa min adab al-qabr, wa min fitnat al-mahya wa mamat, wa min fitnat al-masih al-dajjal. The Prophet would make this dua in salah. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min jahannam, wa min adab al-qabr, wa min fitnat al-mahya wal mamat. Oh Allah, I ask protection from fitna that the people who are alive are going to face, and the people who die are going to face. And then I ask for protection from the fitna of Dajjal. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu says in Sahih Muslim, كان يعلمهم السورة من القرآن He says, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يعلم هذا الدعاء كما يعلم السورة من القرآن. The Prophet used to teach his Sahaba this dua like the way he teaches surah from the Quran. How would he teach a surah from the Quran? He would recite it, the student would recite it back, he would correct his tajweed and make them recite it again till they memorized. Like التحيات. كان يعلمنا التحيات كسورة من القرآن. Istikhara was like the same thing. He used to teach the Sahaba dua al-istikhara like the way he teaches surah from the Quran. Meaning these du'as should be memorized. So Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhab jahannam wa a'udhu bika min adhab al-qabr wa a'udhu bika min fitnat al-mahya wa mamat wa a'udhu bika min fitnat al-masih ad-dajjal. And fitnat al-masih ad-dajjal is a fitna that's inevitable, that's going to happen. It's a major fitna. This is the narrations that we have. There's an interesting story in Sahihain, Bukhari, Muslim, and Aisha قالت دخلت عليه عجوز من عجائز يهود المدينة. One of the elderly women from the Jewish community of Medina came to Aisha's house and she said, إن أهل القبور يعذبون في قبورهم. He said, verily the people who are buried are punished in their graves. Aisha radiallahu anha said, I said, that's not true. Aisha says, she didn't know. Aisha radiallahu anha was like, that's impossible. And I didn't know what the answer was. She left, Prophet ﷺ came. فقلت يا رسول الله إن عجوزا من عجائز يهود أهل المدينة زعمت أن أهل القبور يعذبون في قبورهم. One of the Jewish women came and told me that the Jews are punished in their graves. And the Prophet ﷺ said, صدقت. She's right. It's true. إنما يعذبون عذابا تسمع البهائم كلها. People who are buried in the graves, animals can listen to the punishment. The animals cry under the punishment when they run away. And sometimes, if there's a reward that's being blessed to someone that's buried, animals flock to those graves. They can hear the malaika sending reward to these people. So animals have a very different sense. It's interesting studies on birds and animals and their understanding and comprehension of things before we know they happen. Of course, a lot of it's like because of natural habitat, but an earthquakes. Animals tend to know about a natural disaster like earthquake. Okay, there's a hurricane, you can see the clouds from distance. Earthquakes, lava explosions, things like this that we cannot detect. Animals, they detect it from distance, and they respond faster. SubhanAllah, as if they can see angels ready to come flip the earth or crack the earth. As if there's like an unseen world that the angels expose to these birds. SubhanAllah. Sometimes to babies, sometimes to other creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And there's some animals that if they're in someone's house, the angels don't come, like a dog. The angels won't show up. So there's like this correlation with angels and animals. This is sort of like, it's very interesting. So the Prophet ﷺ said the angels, the animals inherit the punishment of the grave. And there's so many questions, so many hadiths to prove that. Then we go on to the discussion of how a person is given support and footing in the grave. There is an ayah in the Quran in Surah Ibrahim that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when a Muslim is asked in the grave, and فَيَشْهَدُ أَن لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ وَأَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ, when like a Muslim is asked in the grave, who is your Lord? And he testifies, or she testifies, Allah gives them strength. يُثَبِّتُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِالْقَوْلِ. Those who stayed firm in their life, living La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, they're given the strength from Allah to respond. It's from Allah. وَفِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ. May Allah give us that strength. قُولُوا آمين. Because the Prophet ﷺ says, it's in Sahih Abu Hatim, narrated by Abu Hurairah. He said, إِنَّ الْمَيِّتِ إِذَا وُضِعَ فِي قَبْرِهِ. This is interesting. Now there's a part of like the punishment and discussion in the grave and the questioning. But even the person in the grave has the ability to detect what's happening. Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ الْمَيِّتِ إِذَا وُضِعَ فِي قَبْرِهِ إِنَّهُ يَسْمَعُ خَفْقَ نِعَالِهِمْ حِينَ يُوَلُّونَ. When a person is buried and you're walking away from the grave, the person can hear your footsteps. Can hear your footsteps. I don't know if you guys had the chance to watch Sheikh Omar's series. You know, Sheikh Omar just put out a new series about death on Yaqeen. You should watch it. I think he's doing 10 videos or something. And it's about what happens when you bury someone. Maybe they're not relevant enough. It was hard for me to watch it too, because it was hard for me to watch. After my brother passed away, there was a Sudanese Qari that died in a car accident. I don't know because it went viral. Famous, one of the most famous reciters of Quran in Sudan passed away. And we had Sheikh Ammar Shukri on the Miftah Live a few weeks ago. And he was talking about how he knew this Qari and how he was so famous. And there was this movement in Sudan of just exposing the Qurra of Sudan. Like youth got together and they made a studio. And he died with students. And someone shared the janaza from like a drone footage. I couldn't watch it. It was too fresh to watch such a great tragedy. It was such a loss for the whole country. And of course for the family. This guy was young. And it was a tragedy. So it's maybe now I can listen to Sheikh Omar's series. I watched like a few minutes of some of them, and after that, it's just like, whew, it's heavy. I remember my wife used to say when I went for 1 year khuruj, when they would do ta'aleem every night in our house, since childhood, every night before we sleep, there's like 10 minutes of just hadith recitation, reading, or a story of the Sahaba or the Prophets. My wife said I could not ever hear a story of sacrifice because I was going through it so much that I couldn't hear anything anymore. I don't hear it. Tell me something else. So sometimes the body and the mind has a hard time accepting it. But I think you guys should listen to Sheikh Omar's series to give you a perspective. And he did it for so many people dying. In Dallas, we live in a small community, but in big communities like Dearborn, there's janazas every single day now because of COVID. And in Dallas, when I was there over the weekend, he's like, Sheikh Umar, it was not this last Saturday when I met him, Friday, he was like, 4 funerals tomorrow. 4. Like it's a big city, and there are people just dying. You know, people dying. So, and the thing is, like, people who are dying from COVID are dying, but it's not like people are not dying from cancer, heart attacks, or car accidents. Those are still happening. Plus this, it just, so many people are dying. So people need to be comforted. And this is a beautiful hadith that when you go there and you walk away, they can hear you. There is this connection that the person has. This is a beautiful part of this hadith. فَإِذَا كَانَ, this is where it's more relevant when you wash a body, this hadith. فَإِذَا كَانَ مُؤْمِنْ كَانَ صَلَاةُ عِنْدَ رَأْسِهِ. A believer, when he dies or she dies, and the punishment of the grave comes, salah shows up at the head. Because she used to do sajda. Her head used to touch the ground. And then the salah says, you can't come this way. وَالصِّيَامُ عَنْ يَمِينِ. Fasting comes on the right side. وَالزَّكَاةُ عَنْ شِمَالِ. And charity comes on the left side. وَكَانَ فِعْلُ خَيْرَاتِ مِنَ الصَّدَقَةِ وَالسِّلَةِ وَالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ عِنْدَ رِجْلَيْنِ. And all the other volunteer charity this person needs to give, in helping family, and social services, ma'ruf, all the good things that they did, ihsan, they did favorable things they did for people at their feet. So basically, the actions of this person is circulating this individual in the grave. You cannot be punished. And then Surah Mulk shows up, right? Like a bird. Prophet ﷺ gave Surah Mulk the position of a bird. I'm still trying to understand the concept of a bird, because there's so many things that they say it's a bird. Shuhada become birds. Is it actual birds? So my daughter, every day she says to me, call Uncle Abdurrahim, every day. And I just call Sheikh Abdul Wahab. Call someone else. And so she says, Baba, are we going to be, like he asked, are we going to see him in Jannah? I said, of course, inshallah. I said, listen, when you go to Jannah, he'll give you a ride. He said, on what? I said, on a flying horse. She said, a flying horse? I said, will have wings. She said, have wings? She was like, do you want to ride with him? Do you want to ride with him? Ride with uncle. Of course, Mrs. Uncle. She misses her uncle. So I would just go into Jannah, and I was like, then you go into this palace. She's a little girl, so she likes these palaces. She's like, oh, palace? What type of palace? And then I started describing this. And it's not me describing this. A man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, Ya Rasulullah, I feel Jannati khayr. If you can't believe this, then you're going to try your hardest to make this dunya Jannah, and then you're problematic. He said, I feel Jannati khayr, Ya Rasul. Is there a horse in Jannah? It's like someone asking, is there Bugatti in Jannah, right? The Prophet ﷺ said, Na'am. He said, Inna Allah idha adkhalaka al-Jannah, when Allah makes you enter into Jannah, He will give you a horse. Lahu janahayn. It's going to have wings. Yuthiru bika haythu sha. And it will make you fly around wherever you go. And the Prophet said to the guy, like, wow, it's done. Then another Bedouin came, and he was a camel lover. Right? He liked his American cars. So is that Camaro in Jannah? Right? He didn't like the European stuff. Is this a Camaro in Jannah? You know, a Dodge Viper or something? And the Prophet ﷺ said, he didn't say the same answer to him. He says, وَلَكُمْ فِيهَا مَا تَشْتَهِي أَنفُسُكُمْ وَلَكُمْ you can anything you want. So, you know, reminding her that this is what's going to happen, she was like, calm down. All right, we'll just wait for the next ride. So this is the good deeds that come to you. It says, فَيُؤْتَى مِنْ قِبْلِ رَأْسِي فَتَقُولُ الصَّلَاةُ مَا قِبَلِي مَدْخَلُ. You can't enter from my direction. So the head is salah. When you go to the grave, you ask where to stand. People ask you where to stand. Should I stand by the head? Should I stand by the feet? There are three places I would say you should stand. One is you could stand facing the Qibla, which would be the back of that person. His head will be this way, facing the Qibla. So you're facing the Qibla, and you're towards the person's side, opposite side. His head is, or her head is that way. And you can face the Qibla and make dua towards the Qibla. Because dua towards the Qibla is better than dua away from the Qibla. The other place is to stand right next to their face, like their head. And another place would be by their feet. By their feet. And from the sunnah of the Sahaba, many predecessors would stand by the feet of the Prophet. But when we go from the front. We literally see the Prophet laying down, and we go from the front side of the Prophet. From the men's section, the women get the feet side, which preferably is better sometimes. So this is the person you put into the grave, and they're protected by their actions. And then they're now like this. There's this hadith that says that when a person in the grave, they ask the dead person, sit up, sit up. Now, of course, the sitting up is not like the way we sit up. There's this discussion that happens, and then they ask him questions about Allah, ask him questions about Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then Allah subhanahu wa taala يفتح له باب إلى الجنة, then a door to Jannah is open, and فيزداد غبطة وسرورا. Right? When Jannah is open, it's like a huge tease for someone who's pious. I can see it, but I'm not there. Like I'm not in that Jannah. So the person who is pious in the grave, they get so ghibta and won't be jealous, but they just feel so like eager to enter into Jannah. They're so excited about I can't wait till the day Jannah comes. ثم يفسح له في قبره 70 ذراعا. The qabr is expanded. Now again, we have this. From a physicality aspect, does the grave expand? From a physicality aspect. And this is not metaphoric. It has to be taken to literal meaning. What does expansion mean in the grave? This has to be discussed. We'll talk about that. And then, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fills it with nur and light, and He enjoys the grave. And the opposite of that is disbelief. Amma al-kafir, when the questions are asked, who is this person? And they don't answer the questions properly, or disbelief or munafiq. وَكَانَ مُنَافِقًا أَوْ فَاجِرًا. When they put him to the grave, they said, كُنَّا نَعْلَمُ أَنَّكَ تَقُولُ ذَلك. They didn't get the answer, but they will still ask the questions. Then the narration goes, إِلْتِمِهِ عَلِيهِ. Then the order to the grave comes to squeeze this person. Tighten the grave. And it says, فَحَتَّى تَخْتَلِفُ أَضْلَاعُهُ. The grave is tightened to such a degree that their ribs penetrate within each other. They're crushed. فَلَا يَزَالُ مُعَذَّبًا حَتَّى يَبْعَثُ اللَّهُ. They continue to be punished until the day of judgment. Until the day of judgment. And this is the state of the punishment of the grave. What frightens me, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but you know there have been, and I'm saying this on live, so people might think I'm cuckoo, but you know there have been people in the past who have been buried. From their graves, beautiful fragrances have come out. Like they can smell the fragrance from the grave, and the dirt is the dirt. It's like someone came, Imam Bukhari. Actually, there's some scholars that are buried in my mom's city, great scholars, that when they were buried, such a big fitna came that they had to put a fence around their grave because so much fragrance was coming up from the dirt of the grave. And one of them is Sheikh Ahmad Ali al-Lahawi, rahmatullah alayhi. And then next to him is another scholar by Sheikh Musa Bazi, great scholar, he wrote books in Arabic. I went to both of their graves when I visited. There are like 3 awliya buried right together. So it became a big fitna. Even pious people like, Bukhari, rahmatullah, these people, when they passed away. Sahaba's grave also. There was this smell, this fragrance came up. It was like it smells so good. Sometimes, كَشَفَ اللَّهُ الْحَقَائِقَ. Sometimes Allah exposes the hidden truth just for like a appetizer for the believers. Just like, no, this is true. This is true. Ajib. Can you imagine? It's such fragrance. The Prophet ﷺ had natural fragrance from his own body. It was like that. Can you imagine awliya when they pass away? That's the fragrance of the grave. So, meaning the effect of the grave transfers even to an extended world outside. I have sat at graves of pious people, even Sahaba and Anbiya, and it's so peaceful, as if there's Malaika Anwar there. I mean, there's life there. You're not allowed to ask anyone from the grave from anything. You can't do su'al, you can't make dua to the grave. You can only make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but there's like sense of presence around these pious people. But we only ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even when you go to Medina, when you go to Makkah, and the closer you are, you can sense it. Your ruh is pure, and you can sense the pure bodies of these Sahaba. So what frightens me is this discussion, and we'll conclude with this. The discussion I brought up, I hinted this last week, or the week in earlier discussion, is in Nisa'i, in Sunan Nisa'i, Abdullah bin Umar says that when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this man, he has died. The arsh of Allah shook for him. Who's the Sahabi again? Who's the Sahabi that the throne shook for? Sa'ad bin Mu'adh. And you wouldn't know anything about Sa'ad bin Mu'adh other than this part of the story. He's from the Ansar. Anything else? How did he die? He was arrow in Khandaq. He was hit by an arrow, and it ruptured one of his arteries, right? And he bled to death later on. He recovered a little bit, and then he made dua to the Prophet Allah. He said, "Oh Allah," this is his dua. "Oh Allah, if you plan to have war between Quraysh and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, keep me alive so I can continue to defend the Prophet sallallahu. And if this is the last time the Quraysh are going to fight the Prophet, and there's never going to be a war from the Quraysh and the Prophet, I don't need to live because I've done my job to defend the Prophet sallallahu. Basically, I only want to live to defend the Prophet, otherwise take me. I'm not afraid of death." Right when he made this dua, his wound erupted even more, and he bled to death. He passed away. After that, the Quraysh, what did the Prophet say after Khandaq? He said, "Al-an naghzuhum wa la yaghzuna." Now they're not going to attack us. It's going to be us that we're going to make a move. It's over. Then it was Khaybar. There was the Jews. Then there was the Romans and Mu'tah. It was a whole different landscape. Then the Prophet would just spreading Islam all around Arabia, Hijaz. So Sa'd ibn Mu'adh has a lot of virtues. Just naming 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. One of them was when he passed away, the Arsh of Allah shook. وَفُتِحَ لَهُ أَبْوَابُ السَّمَاءِ. The heavens, the doors of the heavens open up for this person. وَشَهِدَهُ سَبْعُونَ أَلْفٍ مِنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. 70,000 angels attended his janazah salah. How many? 70,000 angels. You know, we don't know this, but in our gatherings, don't be spooked out. In our gatherings, angels attend our service. Right now, angels attend our service. And my scholars just say it's so beautiful. They said it so much better than I can ever say it. He says sometimes the speeches affect you. But more than that, is you're sitting in these gatherings and the angels rubbing their wings against your shoulders affect you more. The angelic qualities of taqwa. لا يعصون الله ما أمرهم ويفعلون ما يؤمرون. This is the sifat of malaika. They don't disobey Allah and they do as their order. لا يعصون الله. It comes not through just listening on YouTube. Spirituality and the presence of angels is very hard to, replicate in a YouTube video. Presence. لا يجوز قوم يذكرون الله تعالى ويتدارسون فيه إلا حفتهم الملائكة ونزلت عليهم السكينة وغشيتهم الرحمة. أو كما قال, angels sit down and they gather around you and they're sitting within you. And I would not be exaggerating if you would say jinns also attend the gatherings. Because our speeches, our Jummah khutbah, Jummah is also Jummah for humans. It's not like jinns celebrate Jummah on what day? Saturday. Or the Jummah is on at night, on the ocean. No, they attend. I'll end right there. They attend events. we would be spooked out if we were exposed to them. They attend Salah. In Atlanta, I took Abdul Malik to the masjid. One guy, he came to pray Salah al-Fajr early. He used to open the masjid door. He opened the door and his phone started ringing with the music ringtone. And he got smacked in the face. Bah! And when the Imam came, the Imam and the family would lead Salah there. And he said this huge mark was bigger than a hand of a human. It was just abnormal. And it didn't have like the fingers of a human. Look, the mark of that. And he said, what happened? I looked around, there was nothing around me. He just stopped right there. We'll just end it right here. Maybe one of them was praying tahajjud or was praying his sunnah and you came and just disrupted him. You're going to get smacked. They say that when you pray tahajjud, you shouldn't, when you sleep in the masjid, you shouldn't sleep in the front rows. Like for itikaf. They will pick you up and throw you in the back. It's happened. Happened to some of my friends. I'm not making this up. The front row, the jinn pray tahajjud between the first 1/3 and the second third of the night. And the humans pray tahajjud most often in the masjids, masajid. So, هذا هو الإخبار. So this is 70,000 angels attending the janazah of Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. The Prophet ran for his janazah. The Prophet did not enter the room until, remember that story I told you, the Prophet waited outside for an angel to move a wing. You could see the angels. The Prophet ﷺ prayed his janazah. The Prophet ﷺ did extra events like Allahu Akbar 3 times. And he said this, لَقَدْ ضُمَّ ضَمَّةً ثُمَّ فُرِّجَ عَنْهُ. When he was put in the grave tightened upon him. The grave was made difficult for him. And then the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith of Aisha. This is the hadith of Aisha. لِلْقَبْرِ ضَغْضَةٌ. The Prophet ﷺ said the qabr has where it kind of like tightens up naturally. It's part of the nature of the grave, it kind of like shrinks when you're put into it by the force of the angels. And the Prophet said, لَوْ نَجَى مِنَّا أَحَدٌ لَنَجَى مِنْهُ سَعْدُ الْمُعَادِ. If there was anyone that was going to be prevented from such an experience of the grave being tightened, it would have been Sa'd ibn Mu'adh. Not even him, he was protected. One day, and this is Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, this hadith, Mufti Abdul Rahman brought it up the other day, one of his sessions, one of our Miftah Live sessions. Somebody brought it up, I heard of it. And he brought it up from a very different angle. He said, from Persia, silk of the Persian emperor, somewhere the silk was brought back from a different emperor in their cloth. They didn't have this type of cloth in Medina. And the Sahaba were looking at the spoils of war or the money that came from that land, and amongst them was silk. And they were just admiring the silk. Like, wow. And the Prophet ﷺ said, لَمَنْدِيلُ سَعَدُ الْمُعَاذِ الْجَنَّةِ خَيْرٌ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا وَمَا فِيهَا. Like you're looking at this cloth of silk. Just the handkerchief of Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh is better than everything in this dunya. Meaning, like this is Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, such a blessed person. He also was tested in the grave. The Prophet ﷺ said to the Sahaba, he said, بَلَغَنِي أَنَّهُ شَهِدَ جَنَازَةَ سَعِدْ مُعَاذ 70,000 مَلَكٍ. Prophet ﷺ, this narration that comes by Ibn Umar, لَمْ يَنْزِلُوا إِلَى الْأَرْضِ قَدْ. The 70,000 that came to the grave of Sa'id Mu'adh never came to the earth before. They only came to Sa'id Mu'adh and never came back again. And then لَقَدْ بَلَغَ أَنَّ رَسُولَ اللَّهِ لَقَدْ ضُمَّ صَاحِبُهُ فِي الْقَبْرِ ضَمًّا. And he was put through a trial. And the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنِّي لَأَرَى لَوْ أَنَّ أَحَدًا أُعْفِيَ مِنْ عَذَابِ الْقَبْرِ لَأُوفِيَ مِنْهُ سَعِدْ مُعَاذ. If there was anyone exempted from the trial of the grave, it would have been Sa'id Mu'adh for his piety. But he was also trial. That's one story. And the second one, like these two stories, they give me a little bit worried. And the other one was the story that I said about لما دفن رسول ابنته, when the Prophet ﷺ buried his daughter Zainab bint Muhammad, eldest daughter. She died in the 8th year of Hijrah. This was her last daughter, her eldest daughter, but the last child of the Prophet to die. Actually, no, then Muhammad died the next year. So 8th year Hijrah, Zainab died. In the 9th year, Ibrahim died. So he sat down in Jalasa عند القبر. He sat down at the grave of his daughter. فتربد وجهه. His face went pale, like cold. His face went pale. ثم سري عنه. Then we saw that he became a little bit comforted, or his face was full of light and brightness. He was happy. فقال وأصحاب, the Sahaba, amazing people, may Allah bless them. والله ما ترك لحظة إلا أخبر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. They did not leave an opportunity except they asked the Prophet some details. They did not even ignore the expression of the Prophet's face. The Sahaba were excellent people. رأينا وجهك آنفا. We saw your face. There was something happening. ثم سري عنه. Then we became a little bit happy. What happened? فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ذكرت ابنتي. I'm thinking about my daughter. وضعفها وعذاب القبر. And I'm thinking about her weakness, her feebleness, she's my daughter and she's a human. And I'm thinking about the punishment of the grave. فدعوت الله ففرج عنها. Then I made dua to Allah, and then Allah promised me that He would remove the punishment. وأيم الله لقد ضمة سمعها من بين الخافقين. I swear by Allah that the grave started to tighten upon her, and the people around, the animals who were around us, and the trees, they heard that squeeze. This is the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. And I did not say this. Both of them, Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh and Zainab bint Muhammad, died from an injury which would give them the legitimacy of being a shaheed or shaheeda. Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh died from that battle. He died later. And Zainab her animal was speared by Habab and Aswad, and that was the injury that caused her to die. What do we do? Never think that you're protected. Never think you're safe. You always have to live with actions and making dua. Asking Allah for protection from the punishment of the grave. This is the first place we're going to go. And no one's coming with us. Nobody. In this world, if you're bored, you take out your phone, your laptop, you're good to go for the moment. No one's coming with us except our actions, our salah. The things that we don't pay attention to. That we don't pay attention to. What is it? What is all these things in the world going to do for us next week? Nothing. If you're going to have a good car or a good house, it should be purely used to make the grave a better place. You have a nice wallet, keep some money, donate. You have a nice car, use it to come to the masjid. It's okay. You have a nice house, welcome guests. Feed people. You're smart, use it to help others. You become a doctor, serve people. Heal them. You have the power to give them physical healing and so much other support. Get reward for it. It's not about just acquiring and then becoming miserable when you lose out at the dunya. So what goes with you is your actions. All we're talking about, how much time is dedicated for that. And I'm not going to go to extreme stories, but sometimes it's important. You know how, when you were young, you think about your graduation walk, right? Think about the day you graduate. And you kind of fantasize that moment. Before you get married, you fantasize walking in and everybody's singing. Everybody's smiling. You fantasize those great moments and achievements in this dunya. People who play soccer, they fantasize scoring a goal and celebrating like a real soccer player. No one's watching them, but they still celebrate like they're. It's also important to sit down and close your eyes and contemplate when you're all alone at night and you're going to be buried into the dark grave. What's going with you? Just turn off the lights and just what do I have? What am I taking with myself? How much good do I have? I'm going to be all alone. Think about you being placed and wrapped in white cloth. And then think about you being carried, and then the shovels hit the earth, and the grave is dug, and they put you down. And then your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, which we have children eventually, they'll all walk away. And then think about the angels coming, and they're asking these 3 questions. Think about it. If you think about it correctly, it might take you half an hour at least. Just think about it. Don't do it too much. You go cuckoo. Do it once in a while. It's called muraqabah. It's called self-contemplation. People do meditation just to, find a little bit. Let me tell you one thing about this thing. It's not just a good thing for akhirah, but it's also good for your dunya. So if you're going through a problem in life and you do this, for a moment, you just do that. You might cry, you make dua, you're done. You'll be like, man, it's not that big of a deal that I wanted something I didn't get, it's okay. The matters and the problems of this dunya become very insignificant. It looks very minute in front of you. It's like, I wanted to go this weekend somewhere, and something happened. So everything becomes very insignificant. And if you were to do this once in a while, if you haven't done it once yet, then you don't know what the grave is going to feel like. Think about it. Stop. All the pious people do this. All the pious people. I'm not going to tell you the stories. It's crazy. Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, the way he used to do it, none of us can do it. So think about it. That's called muraqabah, thinking about what's going with us. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take us from this dunya and when He's most pleased with us. But every young person, every old person, nothing goes with it. The word death is also a wrong word. No, we don't die. What happens is death is a word that defines the ending of this life. But there's a continuation, that's the next life. This is why a human is abadi. Every human that's come to this world is everlasting till the day of judgment. Once you've been born, you will never end. There's a continuation in the grave, on the day of judgment, and in Jahannam, لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا. Even a kafir will continue to be punished. And in Jannah, لا يبغون عنها حولا. Everlasting. And that world is more important. Until you don't believe that is real, you're going to struggle for the rest of your life. You're going to be questioning everything. You're going to have to sin. You're going to lie. You're going to be cheating yourself, cheating others. You just don't know. And there is no smarter person than this person. There's no smarter person than this person. Who's constantly thinking about that final abode. What does the world tell you? Everything, marketing, finance advisors, how to make your retirement better, how to make your this better, how to make this better, how to have the best healthcare plan, how to have the best insurance, how to have the best coverage for your car, how to have the best, use of this, software or this phone. Everything is like how to make this space better, and everything ends. Everything ends. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to make the space of the grave a best place. And then the resurrection even a better place, and make us prepared for that. Pious people are not miserable people. Trust me. They're like, you might think, oh my God, if I think about death so much, I'm going to be tired and sick of this world. No, they still enjoy the world. But they say, Alhamdulillah. And then they don't enjoy it, they say, Alhamdulillah, it's all right. We have better enjoyment. So, and they never get jealous of other people's dunya. The reward is the next world. My father, he used to see someone with so much blessings. He always said, Miskeen. I said, Dad, why? He's like, man, he doesn't know Islam. Or if he knows Islam, he's not practicing Islam. Miskeen. You feel bad for him. He never felt envious to someone. This is what only feel envious to a pious Muslim, like someone that donates, prays, and fears God. That's it. Reads Quran. That's the class. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us a tawfiq. Anybody have any questions?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, it's related to the discussion. The question that I had in my mind is that we believe in the concept of Jannah and Jahannam. We didn't see Jannah, we didn't see Jahannam, but we believe because Allah has told us and Prophet Muhammad peace be upon him conveyed this to us. And this is a reality for us. So why there is so much stress on Jannah and Jahannam, but there is no stress on how to live this life, how to make this life a better place, and how to survive in this universe. There is so much bad going on, and we are living here. We are depressed, and there are so many problems in our life. Why it's not being told? Why it's not being discussed among the families, by the sheikhs, and by the society? How to survive in this world, and how to make this place a Jannah, so we can invite that Jannah that we can get out of that. If we become depressed, whenever I hear about Jannah and Jahannam, I become depressed. I think, in order to get that Jannah and Jahannam, that will be given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have to work so hard, and I'm not capable of achieving that thing. But in order to achieve that thing, I miss other things. I miss all the things. Like I miss my life, this life that I'm living right now, I miss the other things. So how to live this life? And another thing is that when we say that Allah will give us this punishment in Jahannam and stuff like that, at the same time we learn that Allah loves human beings more than a mother, more than 70 mothers. So how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put us in that situation, and how will we get through that? Could you please answer that thing, that how to live this life in a better way so that we can enjoy that Jannah?
Yeah. So it's like coming to coming to a class of swimming, you're not going to hear how to ride a horse in the desert. Today's class was about the grave. It wasn't about how to live the world. Discussion was totally different. And the topic for this sessions have been the journey of the soul. And then there are going to be topics about living the life. It's completely different. The topic we're discussing the topic that we've been covering for the past few months. So that's the first answer. Second answer is that there has to be a balance, of course. You can't live in fear. You can't live in fear, you have to live in hope. And there are times when we speak about hope, and there are times we also remind of fear. Why is there so much verses in the Quran talking about akhirah, Jannah, and we don't often discuss the matters of this world, how to live this world, how to make this world a better place. Few quick answers to that is, number one, the first most fundamental thing about our faith is to believe in the next life. And the more a person has yaqeen, conviction of the next world, the better they're able to be a better husband. They believe in accountability. They believe in oppression is wrong. The more a person believes in an oppressor being punished, an oppressor is put to task. Okay, I can't cheat someone. I can't lie to someone because the stronger their belief is. I'm not saying this is a whole ethical discussion that does good ethics exist with people who are not believers? Yes. But I believe, and I should also hope that everyone believes, that ultimate ethics is perfected when someone actually believes. You can have an atheist with good beliefs, but if you have something that, if you share a view opposite to their view, they won't be kind with you. So what is the ultimate responsibility and the right way to approach this is the Prophet ﷺ, and the way he encouraged his companions. If you look at the verses of dealings, marriage, divorce, dealing with orphans, all in Surah Nisa, they all have to relate back to taqwa, self-consciousness. If you don't have this, you're challenging your character. It's going to be questionable. And then that's one answer. Number two is early Islam, there was highly emphasis on these discussions. Paradise and Jannah and Jahannam in the next world, because that's the first thing you have to solidify. And then you can do prayer. Then there are a few components of development of human. Number one, you will do imaniyat. Imaniyat are all the discussions of the things that we can't see. Imaniyat, the belief discussions. And then after you perfect that, you're going to get ibadat solidified. Ibadat are all the actions that are founded on the base of imaniyat. Salah, prayer, fasting. What is fasting? Fasting is complete, devotion on something you believe. You're not eating because you believe there's a reward of Jannah for this. Fasting. So then number two component that gets solidified after faith is ibadat. After ibadat is recognized and solidified and made into a better, consistent practice, then mu'amalat. Mu'amalat is dealings. How to deal with the people. If you come into a community which has very little faith from a Muslim base, and now you tell them, stop cheating, stop selling alcohol, stop doing this, stop doing that, they're like, you're fired. I know imams who went into Muslim communities and they spoke against alcohol and mortgage, right? And they wanted to say, their Islamic finance is a better option. They got fired. They're not ready for that. So the dealings and commerce and actions between each other, that's number three. You will notice that person can pray and do all of that, but then their dealings are not. They're lying at work, they're cheating. So dealings is a third level of iman. Like that's great. Then there is number four, mu'asharat. A person can be good in their faith. They can wear hijab, have a beard. The person can pray tahajjud, mashallah, go umrah every year. The person can be really, really nice with people in the masjid. He comes, opens the door, closes the lights. Excellent person, mashallah. Good character, everyone's praising him or her. The fourth one is the way you deal with your family. That is harder. And that's why the Prophet said, "Khiyarukum khiyarukum li nisaihi." The best amongst you are the ones who deal well with their family. That's the best, right? How do you deal with your family? How do you deal with your wife, your spouse, your parents, your children? So that's called ma'asharat, the dealings with inner circle family. That is the 4-tier development that we have in Islam. This is how the Prophet developed. If you look at even Sirah, there was a gradual, like the Prophet ﷺ didn't make alcohol forbidden right away. He didn't make riba forbidden right away. Riba, interest, was forbidden in Hajjat al-Wada. One of his last speeches of his life was like, that's it. Anyone that has taken interest from Abbas, my uncle, Abbas had a lot of money, he would give people money and he would get returned back in high volume interest. Forget it, it's over. So these are the practical steps. And all these 3 things that I talked about after Imaniyat are to your world, how to make your life better, how to make dealing with people better. And that'll take a process. What happens is overseas in Pakistan, India, Syria, the scholars have traumatized the audience with the discussions of the grave and the Jahannam, where people stop coming to the masjid. Personally, this is the first time in 8 years I've actually had a discussion on the graves in length, like a series on the ruh. These are things that we have to discuss. And being afraid of it, sign of your faith. But you should never be so afraid that you become handicapped by the discussion, because there's Allah that's merciful, right? There are Sahaba who were so afraid that they cried in front of the Prophet ﷺ that never stopped the Prophet from discussing the situation. The Prophet ﷺ said, bring intimidation to a certain extent that they become fearful from haram, but also share hope with them. Give them hope. Bashiru, wala tunafiru. Don't make them run away from Islam. Sometimes it's the scholar's fault that they don't know their crowd. I know my crowd here. You develop them, you nurture them to a certain level, and then you discuss it. But if I was saying this in Miftah Live the other day, I said, you see organizations selling courses, Gardens of Paradise course, or marriage, love and marriage courses, and they sell out in Islamic and Maghrib classes or Miftah programs, or any institution. I'm waiting for a course like, the 7 doors of hell. People are going to be so scared. The 7 doors of hell. Everyone, the way they will do it is the unseen world. So they will discuss Jannah and Jahannam, so kind of balance it. But these are discussions that are necessary, not to a degree that become hopeless. Are you guys hopeless today? Did you guys lose hope in God in one session? If you did, I apologize. All right? Of course, out of 114 surahs, Allah mentions Bismillah 113 times. So He wants you to reinstate that concept. But in that, you're going to don't forget, He's punishing. Right? It is completely, one person said to me on the phone once from overseas, I don't think God's going to punish anybody. I said, why? I said, why? Did you think God's free? He has time to punish everyone? This is a sarcastic thing people say in Pakistan and Syria. They become a little bit overexcited and zealous. God, like you think he's so free, right? Like he's gonna sit there and one by one. Why didn't you pray? Like this person was saying this to me. She started speaking like this. Why didn't you pray zakat in 2001? You're gonna punish for this? That God is so like free. He's gonna and honestly, it was such a stupid statement. It did not deserve a response. I said, even being irrationally hopeless is stupidity. Where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-ajizu man atba'a nafsahu wa ta'anna." The Prophet ﷺ said, a stupid person who says, I can do whatever I want and God's going to forgive me. The Prophet said that. You can't think like that either. You have to think where there's recognition and accountability. And my answer to this is one ayah to her, and I didn't say it. And I hung up the phone and I'm like, سَنَفْرُغُ لَكُمْ أَيُّهَا الثَّقَلَاتِ. Allah is like, I'm not busy, but I'm going to make myself free just to punish you and take question. Allah says to Rahman, سَنَفْرُغُ لَكُمْ أَيُّهَا الثَّقَلَاتِ. And if you pay attention to the next 7 verses, it's all about Jahannam. Then Jannah. Allah's like, I'm going to free myself. Ibn Abbas says, there are a few ayahs which are debated to be the most frightening ayahs. One ayah is in Surah Naba, فَذُوقُوا فَلَنْ نَزِيدَكُمْ إِلَّا adaba. Taste the punishment, and the punishment is intensified. Some scholars say that's, we talk about the most merciful ayahs. I'll talk about it maybe some other day. I give khutbahs on that already. Some of the scholars say one of the most intimidating ayah of the Quran is, guys, I'm going to roll my sleeves up, free myself to take accountability. Sanafruhu. I'm going to free myself. Lakum ayyuhal thaqalan, humans and jinns. And then the Mufassir writes, لَيْسَ لَهُ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ شَغَلٌ يَشْغِلُ بِهِ. There is no such thing that is occupying Allah. Because earlier than that, just the previous few ayahs, كُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي شَأْنٍ. Everything is just natural for God. Nothing is an overwhelming task. So you have to have a legitimate balance. Legitimate balance. A person killed 999 people, then he killed 100 people. That's a great story. To tell someone who's coming out of jail, right? But that's not a great story for someone who's going to kill someone, right? Like someone's coming out of jail, God forgave someone, because a lot of killers in jail. I get questioned all the time from, Umar Noor and Abu Jundi. They used to go to Flint jail. They come out like, Sheikh, does a killer go to paradise? That's a great story for the person who's coming out of jail. It doesn't resonate with you well, but this is a great story for a killer, right? But guys, he's a gangster with a gun in his hand, and he's going to fight someone. And at Isha time, he hears the story. He's going to go kill someone. Like, God's going to forgive him. He's merciful. No. That's not the appropriate time. And the last part of this answer is, it's not just for you, it's for all of us, because it's a good question, what you asked. Is that youth, in your youth, you should tilt towards a sense of intimidation. Because youth have the natural instinct of sin. They're free, they have hormones, they're inclined towards this lustful temptations easily, without very little accountability. When you're old and you're about to die soon, you should lean towards hope. You should not die except وَأَنْتُمْ حُسْنُ الظَّنِّ بِاللَّهِ. I don't care what I did, I know God's going to forgive me. So when you're young, so your youth can be balanced. And when you're elderly, the Prophet says, it's okay, man. I know you had a bad life. Just do tawbah. But that's when you do it, when you're at that age. So there's a time, there's a place, there's a moment, in discussions that happen. But I really like your statement, honestly. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us balance. Allah is more merciful than a mother, 70 times. Allah loves us. And I said this before. I said this all the time. You must have done something horrible to go to hell. Like, it's not like Mufti Rahman said the other day. He said, you must want to, this is a class, this dunya is such a course that you must want to really extremely bad want to fail. Like you came into this course, I am going to do my hardest. You have to try hard to fail. You usually try hard to pass. In this dunya, you have to try so hard to fail because there's so many options of passing. Allah is so merciful. He's so kind. وَيْلٌ لِمَنْ غَلَبَهُ أَحَادُهُ عَشَرَاتُ. Like Fudayl ibn Iyad would say, I don't know how, you know math, how your singles outdo your tens. Like each sin is equal to one bad deed. You swore once, one bad deed. But you said subhanallah once, you got 10 hasana. How do your singles outnumber your tens? How do you lose a basketball game when your three-pointers, your percentage is like 60%? Oh, look at the reverse, look at the stat sheet. Fouls, right? Giveaways, you're like, this is a horrible defense, right? Like this is crazy. So how are you feeling to enter Jannah? When you have all these options, you must have backbited. You must have done something wrong. That's extremely wrong. Otherwise, I've said this over. I kind of echo this all the time after my brother passed away. I said, man, I saw my brother. He wasn't a Sahabi. He was a human. And he was a good human. He never hurt my feelings in my life, passed away. And I've been involved in so many positive information about his separation from us that I'm like, I think I have hope. I'm not that bad, right? And then I said to my wife, I said, good people die early. Then I looked at my wife, I said, I'm gonna die last, because I'm the worst. I'm the worst character of my family. You know, so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, you know, we gain that faith during our youth, that we're able to penetrate into good and save ourselves from bad. And sorry, Sarah, you had a question?
Have scholars discussed what extent Surah Mulk protects you?
Sorry?
Have scholars discussed to what extent Surah Mulk protects you in the grave?
And I only, from the apparent narration, I haven't got deeper into this, maybe I have to revise. Sarah's question is, have scholars discussed to what extent Surah Mulk protects you? From the apparent text of the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever reads it every night, kulla layla, that's the extent of reading it every night, and then the Surah Mulk protects you.
So I have one more question too. When you pass away, you see the angel of death, do you know at that moment you want to have an
Oh yeah, from the moment someone is closing their eyes, I'll talk about this next week, where sometimes someone's alive and they'll just take off, like I said, they take off their mask, their ventilator, or their oxygen mask and say, guys, I'm out. They'll tell you before they leave. They can start sensing the angel's arrival. Umar ibn Abdulaziz, before he passed away, he said, well, I can see people who are not humans and jinns. He said, marhaba, marhaba, and then the family saw him pass away right away. So many Salman Farsi, same thing. We'll talk about the story. They're in the next class discussion. So when you are leaving this world, Ya ayyatuhan nafs al-mutma'inna is the ayah for that. So you are definitely, this is why you see people, they leave the world smiling. They're smiling, and they're dying. Hope I answered your question. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.